I'm finally back. It's been a fat minute since the last time I've touched this series, but I finally returned for Double Bosses Part 3. So anyways, where we left off in the previous episode, we just killed Calclone and Plantera. So the first thing I did was craft the Scourge of the Corruptor, a javelin weapon that splits into homing eaters on here. I spent some time gearing up for the upcoming battles we were going to face, crafting a set of Chlorify armor to replace my Adamantite armor. Now that I think about it, this probably wasn't the most efficient choice, as Chlorify has considerably worse stats than Adamantite, but the pulsing green orb more than makes up for it with its regen and damage. Anyways, the reason I was in the dungeon was to grab some ectoplasm for the Asgard's Valor, an absolutely essential ram dashing accessory. Now those upgrades were done, I went to hunt down a couple Mothrons so I can pick up the Blighted Cleaver, which requires broken hero swords just like the Terrorblade. And the awesome thing about this weapon is that its projectiles home in. So, the first boss we're going to be challenging in this episode is Astrum Aureus. I have pretty high hopes for this guy, it shouldn't be too hard. In the early stages of the fight, he was pretty easy to dodge, so I was lulled into a false sense of security. When his attack pattern is desync however, that's when it becomes pretty chaotic. Well, that was actually kind of tough. Surely Leviathan can't be that bad, right? Right? Yep, screw this, I'm done. Well, you know what they say, when in doubt, commit war crimes against gingerbread men. I went to go do the Frost Moon to think about how I'm going to kill these bosses, and also to get some shiny new weapons, specifically the Snowman Cannon. This weapon packs a fat punch and homes into enemies like the average British youth onto an unattended bike. Eventually I stumbled across a couple Ice Queens, which I needed to kill to get the weapon. And luckily they went down without too much of a fight. Unfortunately though, I didn't get lucky, so I hunted down a couple more. I bought some ammo for the new rocket propelled Snowman launcher. I also swapped to the Chlorify ranged helmet and swapped out the Bloody Worm scarf for the Star Veil, as I wasn't using melee anymore. So with all that said and done, I summoned in the boss and tried out my new toys. In the early phases, his projectiles were pretty easy to dodge, I could just fly over most of them. And when they both jumped at the same time, it just felt like fighting one of them. It's all fun and games until they decide to alternate their attacks. Still though, I'm not letting that discourage me. The only reason I got this far is because I haven't given up yet. For the time being, I managed to counter Aureus's unpredictability by just flying really high and then going straight back down. And this seemed to be working for the most part. I felt basically untouchable. He'd fly above me and then I'd switch directions. At 50% health though, is when Aureus reaches his bullet hell phase, as I like to call it. I decided to go for some more upgrades real quick, replacing my B-Wings with the Aureate Booster, and the Star Veil with the Deadshot Brooch. My new Aureate boosters were a very substantial improvement to the B-Wings, making it a lot easier to dodge Aureus's jumps. Unfortunately though, I forgot it was daytime, so that attempt went straight into the bin. This is when I decided to switch to Hallowed Armor. Upon first glance, the stats are relatively similar, but the Shadow Dodge more than outclasses the Chlorify Pulsing Orb, especially for this boss. The thing with the Shadow Dodge is that if you get hit too much, it's useless, and if you get hit too little, it's also useless. But right now I'm in that perfect equilibrium, where it's just useful enough that I can use it over the Chlorify armor. And I gotta say, this is a vast improvement. At the frequency I'm getting hit, stacking 2 dodges made me almost immortal, at least until I slipped up a couple times. But that's fine though, the good thing was that we were improving rapidly. Even the bullet hell phase was becoming easier for me with every attempt. But then Aureus decided to break the laws of physics to snipe me in midair. His stomps really were becoming a problem. I headed to the dungeon once more to grab a paladin's shield, which I'd used to craft a hero shield and replace the Deadshot Brooch with it. I then upgraded the Honeydew into the Living Dew, and then had a huge life fruit mukbang, after which I returned to farming Aureus. These upgrades turned me into an absolute tank and helped me power through the fight, getting further than I did before. Still though, my arena was absolute dog, pretty much just being the same one I used for Cryogen. So I threw together a quick arena, while also replacing some of my accessories in the meanwhile. Now with my awesome platform arena, I had a flat surface to stand on, which substantially helped during the fight. and subsequently made the chaos of the bullet hell phase a lot more controlled. Also, here's some quick tech I learned for Aureus. When he's about to stomp on you, go towards him and then dash out of the way before he lands on you. So yeah, even with me being complete poo at dodging, this fight still went down like a piece of cake. So, with that battle finally being over, it was time to open my treasure bag, which to be honest didn't really give me anything, except a rage upgrade, which I'll happily take. But anyways, right now I wanted to do the Pumpkin Moon, just for a change of pace after completely clobbering Aureus. I ended up getting to wave 15, getting me a decent amount of money and a couple weapons too. It was finally time for me to prepare for Leviathan. I quickly constructed a platform arena, and then summoned in the boss for the second time. So if you couldn't tell already, due to how the boss doubling mod works, there's 4 Leviathans, which may or may not make things slightly difficult, but the way things are right now, the fight isn't going too bad, at least for the time being. The sheer amount of explosive bubbles they shot towards me was kind of a problem though. But luckily, Leviathan's one of those bosses where you can just run away from and stay relatively untouched. After a short round of sparring with the 4 Leviathans, the Anahitars showed up, and thank the heavens there's only 2 of them. For the most part, their attacks could be dodged easily by just moving slowly or flying diagonally. The later phases do get pretty insane though, as you have to take into account Anahita's stupidly fast dashes as well. All in all though, I was surprised how far I was getting, considering the first attempt completely broke my ankles and stole my lunch money. As I slowly but surely exploded off chunks of Anahita's health, getting her to 20%, she only became more aggressive in charging at me and spamming so many attacks. I was putting up a fight till the very end, but fighting 6 bosses at once can only go one way. I quickly placed down some buffs in my arena and then summoned in the boss again for round 2. The beginning phase of this fight wasn't actually too bad, and it was one of the more fun boss fights I've done. Pulling off some of the cleanest maneuvers possible is one of the most satisfying things in Calamity. It didn't take me too long to get back to where I was at previously, and I even managed to claw one of the Anahitars down to below 10%. But my efforts still weren't enough. I decided to build a box around my arena to help keep me inside of the ocean biome, and also to synergize with the candy corn rifle, which I still haven't tried yet. I gave it a shot, but I quickly noticed that the Giga Chad snowman cannon is just miles better in every single aspect possible. I swiftly returned to the phase of the fight I was on previously, and I've gotta say, this fight really keeps you on your toes. Dodging all the attacks is a ton of fun. The fight was going insane. I had Anahita below 5% health. I was on basically full health. My healing potion was off cooldown. Things were just going too good. I even managed to take down the first Anahita. And shortly after, the second one would fall as well, leaving me with 4 enraged Leviathans. Now the one saving grace of Leviathan is that his body doesn't deal contact damage unless he's dashing, which in hindsight means true melee could have actually been really OP against this boss. But at the same time, true melee against Anahita would have been a complete nightmare. This was absolutely by far my best attempt at Leviathan yet, and by the way things were looking, this could be the attempt I defeat him on. However, sometimes the timings of his dashes were absolutely not in my favour. This battle was looking to be very close. Both me and the Leviathans were on the edge of dying, yet we continued to struggle on further in this all-out battle. Unfortunately though, my fate was death, and Leviathan claimed victory against me. I decided for this battle to switch over to melee, then I headed to the Astral Infection in order to gather some new weapons. The new toys on my Christmas list were the Astral Scythe, a weapon very reminiscent of the Death Sickle, with high damage and a high piercing, perfect for the Leviathans. and luckily this was the very first weapon Santa Claus blessed me with. Anyways, the next weapon I had my sights on was the Hive Pod, a single target sentry weapon that packs a surprising punch, perfect for dealing passive damage to the Leviathan. This weapon was slightly more tricky to get, requiring me to go underground and find a relatively rare enemy. However, within about 5 minutes the weapon was in my hands. Supplementing my switch from range to melee, I swapped out a couple accessories as well, replacing the frozen shield with the Charm of Myths, and the living dew with the bloody worm scarf. With my new and improved loadout, I summoned in the boss, and I've got to say the Astral Scythe is putting in work on this boss. The damage is absolutely insane. I did switch to the Terrorblade for Anahita though, as it's easier to hit them with. Unfortunately though, I actually died. So I re-equipped my old accessories and then went back for another go. This attempt went even worse however, so I decided to switch back to melee. And this time, I focused on killing the Leviathans first, instead of going for the Anahitas. The big guys were charging at me with everything they had, but the Astral Scythe was just too amazing. It's such a good weapon. These guys really were a nuisance in their final phases, but just as I thought I was about to be cornered, I took one down. And the rest would fall shortly after. Now luckily, all that was left to deal with was the Anahitas on their own, which luckily are very easy to deal with. It was a very pleasant respite from the chaos of 4 Leviathans at once. This is another boss unfortunately that doesn't really give you much, but it was still a fun fight nonetheless. And what it does give you, albeit indirectly, is the upgraded hard mode Abyss, which allows us to get depth cells, luminel and voidstone. There wasn't anything I wanted to craft of those things yet, so I just went to the jungle temple instead. Now I'm sure as many of you know, Golem in vanilla is a very easy boss, but Calamity Golem on the other hand is just stupidly buffed for no reason. His fireball attack is near impossible to dodge in most cases. Maybe if it was telegraphed it would be better. But anyways, I'm going to be using a somewhat little known cheese in order to attenuate the difficulty of dodging those stupid attacks. Notice how these frostband projectiles break on impact. However, they can go through the stone blocks perfectly fine. I'm sure 90% of you watching this video know what this is, but this is what's known as a hoik, a once bug which is now a feature in Terraria. To set this up, you'll need to place down a wall of blocks with a wall of platforms on the side of them, and then we need to hammer the platforms into ramps. If you walk through the platforms while holding down, you'll phase through them, but notice how we can't get back in through the other side. What we've made here is a one-way hoik, which will trap golems bouncing fireballs and not let them back out, which is exactly what we need to make this fight just a slightly bit easier. Now I'm sorry to keep you guys waiting for the big reveal, but I swapped back to ranged again, and then I went on a quest to find the Hadarian wings, which, let me tell you, it took a long bloody time to find the Hadarians. The Hadarians are an enemy that spawn in the Astral Desert, but they are so stupidly rare, it took me almost 20 minutes just to get a pair of wings. But anyways, with that fiasco settled, I set up a teleporter to the Golem Temple for easy access, and then I summoned in this bad boy. Now the first thing I did notice was the vastly increased amount of bouncing fireballs, which I am very glad I put that cheese up now. His first phase wasn't really too much of a problem for me, I just stayed up on the higher platform and shot him from below. Once I had all these fists gone, is when he started doing his big hoppy hops, but I found that by circling him and dashing while he's above me seemed to help me dodge most of his attacks. And after enough sparring with good old Golem, the heads came off. Wait, why is there 3? 5? Oh goodness, so it turns out Golem's body gets duplicated, Golem's heads get duplicated, and the heads that come off of Golem get duplicated as well. So there's 8 of them in total. And after I got Golem down to a certain threshold of health, the heads started shooting the exploding bolts, which quickly littered my arena. I mean seriously, it was like a minefield. This was going to be a very tough fight. I placed down a couple of arena buffs and then tried again. Just as I expected, the fight was going very smoothly in the first couple phases. But then, as soon as Golem started shooting his explosive thingies, the fight just crashed and burnt to the ground. And yeah, I would try and try again, only to get the same result most of the time. I tried experimenting with a minecart setup to see if I could possibly pull off another slime god. Didn't work. Okay, well I tried placing blocks so golem couldn't climb up and it would block the explosions from coming out. Also didn't work. I was seriously running out of options here, so I decided to call it a day for now and see what else I could come up with the next day. Because at this point, I'd spent literal hours trying things just for them to completely and utterly fail. So with a fresh head the following morning, I decided to try the Ravager. So, ignore the fact that I'm using the hallowed melee armor with a ranged weapon. That was one of my stupid loadouts from the previous night, which I completely forgot to change. But anyways, the Ravager is a very enigmatic and poorly designed boss. At first glance, you'll probably think you have to stay close to the boss, but you can just completely run away from it and it will do nothing to counteract that. And yeah, any boss that you can run away from is automatically the easiest boss in this challenge. Well, that was at least until this guy pooped out these fleshy shooting things. A lot of them, might I add. So I tried my best to isolate them from the boss and take care of them, but then the boss ran away. I quickly got him back to the same phase, and then tried to whittle down the fleshy shooty things slowly but surely. Okay, so it turns out they're actually the Ravager's heads, the more you know. Anyways, luckily I had Ravager in his final and easiest phase now, where he can literally just run in one direction and win. So, with all the heads taken down, this fight became probably the easiest fight in this entire challenge. I really can't wait till this boss gets his post-Providence rework. Well, that was my first victory after multiple hours of golem, so I feel kinda good about that one. From the treasure bag, all I really got was a rage upgrade, maybe a useful accessory later on, that's about it. One thing to consider though, is the fleshy geodes that the Ravager drops. They actually drop scoria bars, which are post-golem. But I'm not that cheesy, so I'm not going to use them. Since my accessories changed so much from the first golem fight, I'll put them on screen again. So, even though the Ravager's a post-golem boss, that was just a warm-up for golem. If golem's this bad, Lord knows how SCal's going to go. With a bit of effort, I did make it back to the laser explosion phase. And honestly, I don't know if I'm just bad at the game, but this phase felt like an impenetrable wall. I thought I'd try a strategy of swapping out to Reaver armor whenever I'm low on health, which is one of Calamity's more tanky armors, let's just say that. Seeing as how that went, I decided I just needed to Terrarian Arb and grow a pair of Hermes boots. I also swapped out the Master Ninja gear with the Asgard's Valor and the Frozen Shield with the Amalgamated Brain. Here's an inspirational quote from Sir RG. Sometimes in life, you can't go around things or run away, you just have to go through. But you still have a choice in the matter. You can surrender to your circumstances, simply becoming a spectator of your own reality, or you can take back the steering wheel of your own life and create the path ahead of you. You'll train, consume, take, until your very fate and destiny lies in the palm of your hand. It's just how life works, you say to yourself. The strong devour the weak. Blessed are those under your protection. But may God forgive anybody who gets in your way. It's lonely at the top of the food chain, but at the same time, you're completely untouchable. Also, let's go, bro. We finally beat Golem, let's go. That was an absolutely agonizing fight, but I'm so glad we finally got it out of the way. The bosses coming up, however, are going to be some of the hardest, toughest challenges we've faced yet. First things first, I went to the Abyss obviously, because we can finally mine scoria ore. With the scoria bars I made, I realised there wasn't actually too much I wanted, so I just headed straight for the first post-golem boss, Double Duke Fish Run. Now at first, this boss didn't actually seem too bad. I was able to dodge his attacks perfectly fine. The bubbles spawning behind me was kind of an issue, but it wasn't anything that I couldn't deal with. There were definitely a lot more Sharknadoes in this fight, which is not good. I eventually got one of the Fishron's to his second phase, in which he does 3 longer dashes instead of the 5 short ones, and before long both of them would be in their second form. And this is where things got a bit... yeah, a whole lot of sharks. You see, the problem here is pretty similar to the one we had with Golem. Now obviously there's 2 Fishrons, but the bubbles they spawn in get duplicated as well, resulting in 4 times bubbles. But the Sharknadoes, you have quadruple Sharknadoes that also shoot out double sharks. So we have 8 times the amount of sharks to deal with, some of them spawning behind you and completely catching you off guard. Okay, well that was pretty dreadful. Let's do a Martian invasion to see if we can get some more loot. For some stupid reason though, not a single Martian sorcerer spawned in. I'm assuming due to a bug with my boss doubling mod. I ended up spawning them in manually using an item sold by the Abomination, a Fargo's NPC. Needless to say, the fight went exceptionally smoothly considering there was only one of them. The weapon I was after though was the Electrosphere Launcher, so I went back to killing a couple more of them. And with my new Electrosphere Launcher in hand, I went to pay a visit to the jungle, which I haven't seen in quite some time. So long in fact that the corruption had spread pretty far, so I had to contaminate most of it. But anyways, the reason why I'm here in the first place is to pick up some Plague Cell Canisters, a post-golem material dropped by Plague enemies, with which you can craft some cool weapons, accessories and armor. And also the summoner for the Plaguebringer Goliath, my next target. So I crafted the Abomination, and then dived headfirst into this fight. Now normally, this would be one of my favourite fights in the mod. It's just the perfect amount of challenging, but not unfair, and you can't run away from the boss either to cheese it. But this challenge made the fight absolute hell. The phases were constantly out of sync, and the minions were double too. So they were basically, man, it was awful. Well, those fights certainly kicked my Terrarian metal plated butt cheeks. I built a teleporter setup considering I was going to be here for a long time, and then built a quick platform arena. When their dashes were synced up like this, the fight did become very fair and fun again, but obviously that's not in the spirit of this challenge. If one of them was shooting stingers at me and the other dashing towards me, I was guaranteed to get hit. Luckily though, for this run at least, my luck was incredible. All of her phases were being synced up and matched perfectly. It's like it was meant to be. I'd glide and weave between the two of them like butter on a slice of toast. Eventually they started doing their diagonal dashes and the minions flooded the screen like people in the first carriage of a train. No, seriously though, why does everyone get on at the front? You can just go to the back and it's completely empty. Anyways, I tried to fight again. You gotta love it when Plaguebringer faints her dashes. Like, come on man, it ain't that serious. Fabsaw really thought he was onto something here, man. But yeah, anyways, I got my ass flipped like a burger and then directly handed to me. I figured I'd challenge the lunatic cultists as I haven't fought them yet. At first, the fight looked fairly doable. A nice breather from Plaguebringer Goliath. There were a lot of attacks filling up the screen, but it didn't seem like anything I couldn't dodge. At least, that was until these shadow ball things spawned in. Cause come on, what even is this? These things will just snipe you out of nowhere with no real way to actually dodge them. I know this challenge is meant to be unfair, but have we seriously come this far for nothing? I thought things were looking bad back at Golem, but this challenge just proved me wrong again. I went to go commit war crimes against the jungle population as I wanted to try out the Plague Reaper armor. Compared to the Hallowed armor, it has marginally better stats aside from defense, but most importantly, it grants you immunity to the Plague debuff, which will synergize very well with the Plaguebringer Goliath fight. Unfortunately though, I would have to sacrifice the Shadow dodge, so I'm not sure if this would be worth it. Either way, I crafted the Plague Reaper armor and replaced my Living Dew with the Celestial Stone. Yes, I know I could have made the Celestial Shell, I just didn't. To be honest, the new armor set didn't really change the fight much as I was still getting hit to completely stupid things. I'll admit my gameplay was a bit slobby here, but even if I was running at peak performance, I probably still wouldn't have got very far. I'd figured I'd test out Duke Fishron with this armor on as well, to see if I was just tripping. And hold on, I was actually cooking for real for real. I'm never saying those things again. I decided to be an absolute genius and go outside the arena, so I had to teleport back in. And then a shark sniped me. I tried crafting the hydrothermic armor and switching to melee. The Terrorblade definitely made the bubbles easier to deal with, and I was tankier for sure. This extra boost helped me bring myself even further into the fight. It seemed like melee was definitely the right way to go for the big old Duke, definitely bringing me a lot further than ranged ever could. I tried fighting the lunatic cultist again as a melee warrior. That was still a completely BS fight though. I picked myself back up and gave the fight another try using the Fallen Paladin's Hammer, a thrown hammer with exceptionally high damage that spawns an extra ghost hammer every 3 hits. This was doing incredible single target damage to one of the cultists, but didn't really pair well with the fact that there was 2 of them. I really wasn't making any progress at this point, so I decided to try the Old One's army to see if I can get the Valhalla Knight armor. The event went absolutely flawlessly for the most part, until I reached wave 7 where 2 Betsy's spawned. Now obviously I knew this was going to happen though. I was handling them excellently, but somehow the progress bar went all the way to 100 in a split second and the event just ended. This was fine by me though, I didn't really need Betsy's drops. As long as I had the Valhalla Knight armor, I'd be completely happy. Now, compared to the hydrothermic armor, the Valhalla Knight armor is an absolute beast. It has relatively similar melee stats compared to hydrothermic, but on top of that, it also has the extra sentries, 4 HP per second life regen, and 60% extra minion damage, which is absolutely insane. Still died to Plaguebringer though, and it didn't really help with the cultists much either. In fact, if I'm being honest, it didn't really help with anything at all. But I had one more ace up my socks. Astrum Deus. Now wait, hold on a minute, where is he? Having a bit of trouble are we? Oh, okay, that's not normal, is it? Alright, let's see if it works now. Nearly there, but I wanted 2 of them. Screw it, let's just see what happens anyways. Oh. Okay, yeah, you do that then. No matter how much I tried and tested, the wormy boy just did not want to work with my boss doubling mod. And there was one other boss I tested in the future that doesn't work, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. And for the record, I did try spawning multiple of them with Heroes mod, but that also didn't give me any results. I didn't want things to have to come to this, but after another half hour of trying the same 3 bosses over and over, and still getting the exact same result, I figured this was the only way to do it. Say whatever you like, but me personally, I don't see another way of how I'm gonna get out of this loop. But hold on, take a look at Astrum Deus's health. If you've read my community post, you already know what's happening. As a forfeit, I'm gonna fight this boss at 10 times HP. There's also another boss I'm gonna have to do this forfeit with as well, but I'm not gonna spoil which one it is, but it's coming up soon. Strap yourselves in and grab a cup of tea, because this is about to be a very long ride. The first 10% of his HP went down pretty easily, especially considering that he's 4 HP normally. I didn't really go into this with any plans, so I'm kind of just winging it at the moment. I am very glad we killed the Ravager so early though, because the Spikecrag staff is amazing against this boss. Below 80% HP now, and one thing I forgot to consider is that we're going to be fighting this guy enraged half of the time. Luckily though, all he really gains when he's in enraged form is an extra speed boost. So I stayed diligent and kept chipping away at his health with the Fallen Paladin's Hammer and Spikecrag staff. To my surprise, I managed to get to the second phase of the fight, which means I have all the more to lose if I die. I'm gonna have to take out the same health pool I did in the first phase 4 times over, which is 8 million health now. And just to put that into perspective, the entire health pool of this boss is more than all of the Exomechs and Escal combined, in expert death mode. Anyways, we're at 90% now. The fight is looking very promising so far, even though it is taking absolutely forever. I was taking a few stupid headshots, but I thought to myself, in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't really matter as long as I'm consistent. However, I got too cocky, and like a cornered rat, I was swallowed up by Astrum Deus. and man did that feel awful. I went straight back to fighting him though, and this time I tested out a couple new weapons, but I figured the Fallen Paladin's hammer was the most consistent at dealing high damage and keeping me far away from the boss. I also brought in the vampire knives, in case I got especially low on health. Oh, and I also switched from the Spikecrag staff to the Hive Pod, as the Spikecrag staff was severely lagging my game, and I found the Hive Pod to be more consistent overall. It wasn't too long before I was back where I was before, and also this time I decided to switch back to the Snowman Cannon, as I wanted to play it really safe this time and not die. My current strategy was, if I took a headshot, I'd use the vampire knives to heal back up to full health, and then go back to using my primary weapon again. This strategy was working absolutely flawlessly. I saw no way how this could possibly go wrong. I was completely cruising through this fight, albeit at a very low speed. Okay, imagine being the Terrarian for a second, fighting a cosmic deathworm for 2 days straight. The absolute stamina is unreal. Minecraft Steve ain't got nothing on the Terrarian. Real talk though, this phase was fairly easy to dodge, but at the same time I had been keeping this up for almost 40 minutes at this point. I did not care though, I did not want to do this whole 45-minute fight again. I tried my hardest and gave my absolute best effort in order to stay afloat in this sinking ship. This was going to be the attempt I win, no discussion. Except my 45-minute run was ended prematurely by an astral mine. And to rub salt in the wound, pirates showed up to my gaff immediately after. Feeling particularly masochistic on this day, I decided to inject alcohol directly into the wound by attempting some of the other bosses that I'd failed multiple tens of times, probably even more. I haven't even checked the boss checklist yet, but we're just gonna go with... I decided to call it a day after that absolute extravagant failure fest. I decided to warm up today on Duke Fishron as my first boss. I was gonna challenge Astrum Deus again, I had to. It was my only choice at this point. Things started off pretty solid on this day though. I managed to get Duke Fishron very low, even down to his 3rd phase. And to be honest, even his 3rd phase, with 2 of them, felt like nothing to me at this point. However, that was until the Sharknadoes started spawning in. There's simply just too much to keep track of. I knew I needed to make the absolute most of my circumstances if I wanted to take down Astrum Deus, so I went to fish up some armoured cavefish to make endurance potions. Then next I went to fish in the jungle to get summoning potions. They may not be the biggest buff, but at this point I'm going to take anything I can get. I also crafted the camper for a plan I have, which will be relevant in a second. Yep, I'm back for more, and this time I'm 10 billion% gonna beat this boss. For this attempt, I made a second loadout with mostly regen accessories. In case I get low on health, I'll switch to it so I can quickly get back up to full. Also, I used the cryogenic staff sentry in the beginning, as it shreds Astrum Deus at the cost of lagging my game. It took absolutely no time, well, at least compared to the other fight, to get him to his 2nd phase. I also started using the Snowman Cannon, as I tested it with the DPS meter, and it did ever so slightly more DPS than the Fallen Paladin's hammer. This video is never going to do justice as to how long this fight took. You can literally see the Terraria days go by as I chop up this footage, it's crazy. I had one of the worms below 5%, if I died here I'd have to repeat an entire hour of fighting. I had him on 1% now, my health was nearly full. I played things as safe as possible for the final section. I charged up adrenaline and then gunned him down with my Snowman Cannon till he finally exploded into nothingness. All that was left now was the final worm. And what do you know, after this 45-minute fight, he was basically nothing to me. This is the live Stir RG reaction. This took 45 fucking minutes. Do not do this ever in a normal playthrough, I swear, man. Well, that was some long fights. Don't really know why I did it really, because I still have to kill the lunatic cultist to get Astral Ore. And that still wasn't looking any easier. Honestly, there was no way I was ever going to beat the cultist legitimately. So I set out on a journey to make the tankiest loadout possible. If I can't overpower this guy, then I'll just have to nullify his attacks. Except that didn't really work. Well, okay, maybe if I try to pull a slime god on this guy. Okay, well this is going alright actually. I'm dodging most of his attacks. Never mind. Yes, never mind. During these previous attempts, I had a thought in the back of my mind. I didn't want things to come to this. I didn't want to have to resort to this, but there's no other way. So, let me tell you a little thing about hoiks. When you're using them, it doesn't actually count as moving. As I'm jumping up and down here, you can see that my movement speed is going up and down. But when I enter the hoik, it stays consistently at 0. The reason for this is that hoiks don't actually move you, they instead displace you. And what we're doing by creating a hoik is taking advantage of this displacement and setting up a chain of them in the direction you want to go. Now, we can also amplify this concept even further by creating what's known as a hoik loop. Essentially, we create hoiks in all 4 directions and join them together to create a loop that just keeps going indefinitely. Now that's the main gist of things, but if you want to check out this concept even further, I'd highly recommend checking out Sorbet Cafe's, I think that's how you say their name, Comprehensive Guide to Hoiks. It's a great watch if you're interested in the topic. They also make some other unique challenge videos, and yeah, I'd highly recommend checking out their content. Anyways, enough of my waffling, let's test out if my hoikpothesis actually works. I summoned the boy in and jumped into the hoik. Luckily, as predicted, it didn't count as movement towards the camper, so I was still able to deal full damage. But my health was going down very quickly. The hoik loop wasn't nearly big enough to dodge all of the cultist attacks. Especially the stardust fragments, which would stay in one place and slowly whittle down my health. I realised this puny little thing I constructed wasn't nearly big enough, so I went and made another huge hoik loop. This one being so massive, despite how fast hoiks can let you travel, it still took like 10 seconds to get through the whole loop. I did still have my doubts about this one however, as I realised they could just despawn considering the sheer size of this loop. I also noticed that my damage output was severely lacking. Sadly, as I predicted, they would actually despawn, so this time around I considerably shortened the hoik's length. Now, from as far as I could tell, this did definitely stop the issue of them despawning, as I never got far enough away from them to actually have that happen to me. But there was still the glaring issue of my extremely low DPS, so I went to go pick up an old friend. And I also made a couple of tweaks and adjustments to my loadout as well. Things were looking much better this time. The damage was great, the cultists weren't despawning. Okay, I forgot to put on wings. Okay, my bad, I'll go put some on. Okay, now that I have wings, there should be absolutely zero reason why my plan fails. This is perfect. I spaced out my hive pods up here so they could do nice passive damage to the cultists, and then use the Abyss Blade as my main weapon, as it has homing projectiles. This fight was going way too smoothly. I was barely getting hit, only enough to just barely stop my adrenaline from fully charging. The fight was essentially fully AFK, aside from me holding down left click for the Abyss Blade. But at the same time I could have just automated that with an auto clicker. And I know doing the fight this way is pretty cheap, but believe me, you do not want to do this legitimately. If any of you guys can do this fully legitimately, no hoiks, no cheeses, I would actually love you. Anyways, we were getting very close to actually killing this guy. I'm so glad this plan works. I saw no other way of how I would achieve this. Obviously the final one alive brought me no trouble. I barely got down below 3/4 of my health. And before I knew it, the 2 cultists were eradicated. And man, it felt amazing to be finally free from this stage of the game. I could finally mine astral ore, get the pillar tier weapons, but a new, even bigger threat stood in my path. A rite of passage, which, if I'm capable of defeating, I'll advance to the final portion of the game. Now real quick, I think I actually lost some footage or forgot to record it. In that footage, I mined the astral ore, crafted the astral armor, and I think luckily that's all I did. So, yeah. After killing the cultist, I obviously mined the astral ore, crafted the astral armor, and then I rushed immediately to go take down the pillars. When I then noticed, they're all fused together. Now obviously, I'm sure you can guess how this happened. 2 cultists each spawn 2 sets of pillars each with this mod, so there's 4 sets of pillars each in my world. Now I just want to compare the astral armor and Valhalla Knight armor real quick. The astral armor is insane, I've got to say. Obviously the Valhalla Knight has higher defense and is more tanky, but the Astral Armor is just insane overall. And the fact that the damage boosts are classless means I can use any class weapon I want. And having 3 extra minion slots is a lot better than having 3 sentry slots, obviously. Anyways, it took a decent effort, but I managed to take the Nebula Pillar down first. I checked the recipes for the Nebula Fragments, and that's when I noticed my baby, my precious, the Scorpio. Boy, I've missed this weapon so much. I crafted it almost instantly after I saw the recipe. The Scorpio's main attack shoots out a burst of homing nano rockets. But the real fun and nuance of this weapon comes with the right-click attack. Every 3 bursts of rockets you fire, you'll be able to shoot 1 nuke, which you can get some insane snipes with on enemies. Anyways, enough of me gushing about my favourite weapon in the mod, it was time to take down the rest of the pillars. The Vortex pillar went down without too much trouble, but with its fragments there wasn't really anything I wanted to craft. However, with some stray solar fragments I did pick up, I made the Spectral Storm Cannon. Another ranged weapon which rapidly shoots out flares, and homing souls. Another awesome homing weapon I can add to my arsenal. With these two, I destroyed the final 2 pillars, and then began the final battle of this episode. And yes, I died here, don't even question it. I was face to face with the final challenge of hard mode. I'd made my preparations, I conjured up probably the tankiest loadout anyone's ever used. So beefy and... Shut up Discord. So beefy in fact, that I was probably the first person ever to actually use the Brittle Starstaff's defensive function, which brought me up to an absolutely whopping 192 defense, which ultimately still couldn't make up for my lack of dodging skills. Still though, I got right back into the fight, however this time I forgot to set the Brittle Stars to the defensive function. Either way though, to comment on how the fight's actually going, luckily Moonlord is one of those bosses which you can run away from, which makes it a Callum turn easier compared to other bosses in this challenge. Still though, Moonlord is definitely not a boss I'm strongest at, and Calamity mod Moonlord is far from being an easy challenge. Still though, I pushed on forward and practiced as much as I could. I nearly had the left arms taken down while the right ones were on half of their HP. Eventually I popped one of them, and for some reason the true Eye of Cthulhu's don't actually get doubled, which I am so glad they don't. But there'll still be 2 times the amount of them anyways due to having 2 Moonlords, so there will be a lot of projectile spam. This is what you call a 10 quadrillion IQ move. I tried swapping to the Hadarian wings for the extra speed, but their flight time without the angel treads wasn't nearly enough. I thought I'd try using the Starborn Helix Star for extra damage instead of the Brittle Stars for more defense. But once again, I'd sacrificed too much of my mobility for tankiness. So I swapped out the Hero Shield for the angel treads, and this helped considerably. I guess mobility is better than defense any day if you have enough skill. Especially on a boss like Moonlord. I got to the same stage again where I'd taken down all the hands and only the head was remaining, but one stupid mistake ruined the entire fight. No matter what I threw at this guy, I still couldn't get his core to open up. I also realised I hadn't made the miracle fruit yet, so I crafted that immediately. And then I made one simple change to my loadout. Doctors hate me for this. I took off all my mobility accessories, my wings, my angel treads, and for mobility, I relied solely on the Witch's Broom, a mount with infinite flight. Dodging the mega death lasers of doom became relatively simple. I'd fly diagonally up in preparation for them, and then just go over the guy's head. I still needed some practice with this new mount strategy though, as to be honest, I rarely ever use mounts in Terraria. It was mostly intuitive however, and quickly became normal. And having an extra 2 survivability accessories made things so much better. I didn't care how many times I died, I was getting further and further with every single attempt. Eventually I'd beat this guy. I swapped to the Stardust Dragon Staff and realised holy Callum on a gaming chair, it was doing so much more damage compared to the Helix whatever staff. I managed to get the core open on one of the Moonlords, which is amazing progress. The sheer amount of true Eyes of Cthulhu though is something to behold. I mean, just look at this projectile spam. I finally took both of the heads down, and now it was just a slow and steady race to the finish line. Who would crumble first? My situation was looking pretty dire though. All 6 true eyes of Cthulhu were out, and the adrenaline from popping all the eyes ended up getting to me. But I'm not giving up when I'm literal inches away from success. I swapped out the infected jewel for the amalgamated brain, as I was getting hit just enough as to which a dodge would be useful.
Wait, what? Why is his laser doing that?
I'd finally gotten both cores open again. This was it, the final showdown. This is where every single ounce of skill and patience I've developed over this challenge would be tested and put to its limits. Moonlord wasn't going down without a fight though. Him and his 6 little eye buddies threw absolutely everything they had at me. But I stayed diligent and focused till the very end. There were so many more challenges ahead of me I had to face. I wasn't letting Moonlord stop me here. This won't be where my journey ends, Tentacle Boy. This is just the beginning. Oh, come on. Why does he have to glitch out in the epic moments? Come on, man. Okay, let's just ignore the goofiness. I still had one more Tentacle Boy to take down. And with both Moonlords destroyed, that concludes part 3 of the Double Bosses challenge. Thank you all so much for watching this long ass video. I hope you all enjoyed it. I spent a long time working on this. And as I said, this is just the beginning. You can expect part 4 in up to a month and a half, I'd say. But if you want updates on when videos come out, be sure to join my Discord server, as I'll be posting updates in there. And if you like the music in this video, most of it is actually made by me, so feel free to check out my music channel if you're interested. Anyways, yeah, like and subscribe and all that bollocks, and stay blessed.
Thanks for watching the video.